Well, Gabor, it's really nice to catch up with you again. How are things going in Hungary these days?
Thanks. We are fine, close to the vaccination phase. So I think everything is right in Hungary.
Good to hear. Now, I was talking to someone recently and they were talking about Experiment Hungary. Tell me a bit more about that.
Yeah, I think it's not a new story. Our government started this, I also would call it Experiment Hungary, roughly 2010. At that time, our government decreased the corporate tax rate to 9%. Our personal income tax rate is down to 15%, 1.5, flat. And everybody asks the questions that when will Hungary go bankrupt? 5 minutes, 5 days, 5 months. Because if you don't have corporate tax revenue, you don't have personal income tax revenue, you must be broke in a very short time. But our government said that, by the way, Hungary has the highest VAT rate in Europe, 27%, which is the standard rate. And our government focused purely on VAT. So we had a black economy, we had a gray economy, people avoided paying taxes, VAT. But our government made really tough steps that if you are buying something, you have to pay VAT. The 27% VAT must flow to the state. Just give you an example. If you go to any shop and you purchase something, a car, a cup of coffee, whatever, you have to use, the seller have to use the cash register, and the cash register is connected to the central tax authority via internet. So they know immediately that somebody purchased a cup of coffee and VAT is payable. No excuse. If they find you, and we have tax officers with iPads who are connected to the same system, they are in front of a coffee shop, and if they are seeing that people are purchasing coffee, but the money is not coming in, somebody is playing with the cash register, and they close the shop for 1 week.
Fascinating.
And this is only one example.
Yep.
And we have many, many such things that even we as KPMG, if we issue an invoice with Hungarian VAT, it must be reported to the state online within 5 seconds. So pretty tough, but if you look at the balance, we have a very low corporate tax rate, we have a quite low personal income tax rate, VAT is relatively high, or the highest in Europe, but because everybody is paying the VAT, our government is not broke, but it's even have a surplus. So we are getting fine and fine. And you know, this is when I started to discuss with my colleagues that if you just think about the last 5 years in corporate taxation, international corporate taxation, BEPS, Pillar 1, Pillar 2, MLI, you can go on for minutes. For what? For corporate tax revenue, which is hard to collect. You cannot predict, but the company will have a loss. They will make a disaster business decision. They will make a loss. They will not pay anything. But if you go to VAT, you have consumption. And because you have consumption, it's easier for the government to influence the level of the consumption. And for this reason, to increase or influence the level of VAT revenue. So I know it's a stupid idea and it goes against all macroeconomics, microeconomics, doctors and opinions. If we would just a little bit forget corporate tax, just a little bit for a few seconds, and put the same amount of effort on VAT, what would be the result? We only know one example. This is called Experiment Hungary, but it showed that it's a good solution. Whether it can be duplicated in UK, Germany, US, it's a big question whether you will have ever VAT. I know it's a kind of serious question, but if you look at all the countries who are having VAT, for example, the states in the Gulf, Dubai, Qatar, the Emirates, they introduced VAT in the last few years because they need revenue, and instead of introducing personal income tax or corporate tax, real corporate taxation, they introduced VAT with a rate of 5%, if I correctly remember. But still, it's easier to collect, it's easier to force the payment. So it's much, much better, just from a technical standpoint, than collecting corporate tax, where you need thousands of pages on transfer pricing, special rules, whatever.
So that's really interesting. And of course, you know, for cynics who would say, can this really work? I mean, Hungary is an example of where it's actually worked, right? So yes, it can work. And it was fascinating, your point about how just connected everyone needs to be to the central tax offices, so that this can be, enforced instantaneously.
And just as a further step from next year on, because the Hungarian state sees all the invoices you are issuing, they are seeing all the invoices that was issued to your company. So I think from end of this year or next year, it really depends on the IT environment, they will even send you your draft VAT return, because they are seeing the incoming and outgoing invoices.
Fascinating. I mean, it certainly is a lot easier way to collect tax revenues, right? I mean, your point about you don't need lots of legislation. People do transactions happen. So if you can tax those along the chain, that's the way to go.
Yeah, and I remember when I had my university years, 20-something years ago, the professors made a calculation that if you pick whatever country where you have VAT and corporate tax, just see how much is the VAT revenue, how much is the corporate tax revenue, and how much time they spend on collecting this amount of corporate tax and this amount of VAT. So from a poor business perspective, and I know it's strange to talk about business perspective in case of a state, VAT is the best product. Easy to collect, you don't need so much effort, you only really have to, you can go online without any problem. In case of corporate taxation, you end up very soon at the Supreme Court or higher level courts with a question, you don't know what is the outcome, carry forward laws, carry back whatsoever. Why the hassle? You purchase a coffee, pay your VAT, and that's it. You made your citizenship obligation.
Well, really interesting to see that it's actually been successful. And you mentioned Experiment Hungary 2010. So this has been going on for a while. So it clearly is a successful model.
Yes. And we are very proud of it in Hungary.
Just fascinating, Gabor. So just fascinating. Well, look, thank you very much for your time today. That was very interesting. And who knows, maybe it is a model that other countries, should be considering. You just never know. It sounds easy.
It's easy. And I think Hungary was the first country where the cash registers and the invoicing softwares, ERP systems are connected. But if I look at the legislation coming up in other countries, at least in Europe, the other tax authorities are following us because they have the results of the Hungarian experiment Hungary, and they see that, hey, you can do it. Companies can use the software, they can use the invoicing software issued by the tax authority, or they can link whatever SAP Oracle system Sun you have to the central tax authority, and it's deal done.
Interesting. So maybe that, for folk that have Hungarian operations, this is a test case of what they may be needing to go through in other countries in which they do business.
Yes, that's definitely true. Yes.
Well, just fascinating, Gabor. Look, I got to believe this keeps you relatively busy. Thank you for your time. And I'm glad to hear things are going well during these pandemic days.
Yes, thank you very much.